Okay, I'm Jody Buttram, and I'm here doing the IL 650 Assignment 3 Curriculum Specialist interview with Miss Jody Jacobs.
And I'm Heather Brown, and we are representing the DeKalb County cohort group.
So, Ms. Jacobs, thank you for being with us today. Just a couple of questions. We'd like to start with, how do you think that the district maintains an integrated curriculum?
Well, curriculum is something that we're really working towards. When you've got 13 schools plus a career tech, you've got, kind of varied needs. Well, not necessarily varied needs, but you've just gotten various perspectives, I guess that's the way to say it. And so when you're thinking about curriculum, what you want to do, my whole thing is to have it equitable. In other words, just because a child lives in this zip code versus this one doesn't mean that they have better resources or even better instruction. Or at the school level, if my child gets, one teacher and another child gets a teacher across the hall, we're just trying to make sure that our curriculum is kind of a guaranteed curriculum, that we're giving our best to all kids. So when you're talking about how to ensure that we have an integrated curriculum and that it meets those needs, it's just really being present and talking to people and understanding what's happening within that classroom, and then adjusting, or within that classroom, within that school, which rolls to the district level, to ensure that we are on the same page, because that's what our kids deserve from us.
Yes.
Okay, the next question is, how do you lead and motivate teachers to adhere to the prescribed state standards?
Well, that's, again, the size is difficult. I believe, and what we're trying to accomplish is, we're letting the teachers do the work with curriculum. So, in the summer, inviting anybody, and which summer's not a good time, and I agree, but like this past summer we had 2 flex days, and so we wanted to not only give everybody an opportunity to earn their flex days, but it also kind of met our need to make it work. So we had them come in, and they identified power standards, and then they identified the learning targets that were with each of those standards. And then they were able to say, all right, what order do we want to teach this in? And then going one step further to say, here are the resources that we have available that match that. And trying to do that, the important part is not necessarily that we wind up with curriculum documents. That's not even that's a great product that we have. But hearing those discussions that teachers have, that's what, I can't motivate a teacher like other teachers can. And I'm thinking of one particular math example. We finished day 1, and the next morning a teacher came in and said, I went home last night and told my husband that I'm a terrible teacher after listening to all of them. And I said, no, you're not a terrible teacher, but just having that discussion was motivating to her to think beyond what she normally did. So I think, back to the question is, leading that is really just facilitating teachers doing the work, which is a slow process. But to me, it's necessary, because I could sit at my desk and say, we're going to do this, this, and this, but at the end of the day, I'm the one who owns that work. And it needs to be the teachers who are, tasked with implementing it.
Okay. What about the instructional programs or activities, the materials in our district? How do you go about monitoring those things?
Well, we're several ways. Again, just being aware and being in schools and kind of hearing the discussions and seeing things being done. But in addition to that, we are trying, and this is always an obstacle, but also trying to support when we put something new in. So for example, benchmark literacy is something that we have in. So what we're trying to do is put a consultant on your campus and make sure that, at least 2 full days this first semester, you have access to somebody to use them however you want. So we know that the more people understand, the better chances are they're going to implement it. Because I don't really think there are that many teachers, and of course there's always a handful, but that many teachers who don't want to utilize. You just got to give them the tools to do it. So got that on-site coaching the same way in math, and then additionally we do rely on our instructional coaches to help with that kind of thing too. It's never enough. I mean, you need somebody on every campus, but those are some of the things that we're trying to do.
How do you use diagnostic tools to assess, identify, and support instructional improvement?
So there's a lot of things we use to, I guess you would say, diagnose. We've done a lot of work with surveys, asking people what they need, even asking what they believe. If we believe that high expectations matter, then how are we going to foster those beliefs? So we've got surveys. Then you've got the traditional data. I mean, we can look at our certain areas of math, certain areas of reading, and I mean, you can kind of diagnose that. If you go deeper into some of those types of reports, you can even diagnose it to, well, it's not a word calling issue, it's a comprehension issue. I mean, you can kind of go into that. Additionally, when we're in schools, you can kind of start diagnosing some needs that we have. For example, we can look at, and y'all know that we ask visitors to look at, what, not necessarily what are teachers doing and saying, but what are kids doing and saying. And if we look at assignments and see that they're, kind of who, what, when, where assignments, then that leads us to know that we've got to do some work around helping kids learn to do those more higher order skills like analyzing and synthesizing and creating kind of things, because it's kind of easy, on a typical walkthrough type of round. I may go on about 100 classrooms, and that's everywhere from K to 12. And if we start seeing those same trends, if it's isolated to one content or isolated to one campus, that's one thing. But it's kind of easy to start seeing trends after a little while. Look, okay, our kids aren't being asked to do this, so let's provide some support in that area.
What about the infusion of technology into classrooms and its impacting or the curriculum in our district?
So what we know about our technology and how it's impacting, and the researchers say that this is natural. You go from an area of not having a whole lot of technology within the classroom, or you've got enough for pairs or groups, to now everybody has access to one, which is kind of where we are. And so they say it's natural for that use to become a very surface area again. In other words, it's just what we're asking kids to do isn't that much different than if they were doing it on a worksheet or doing it in any other old form. It's just substituting what we used to do. So now what we're trying to get to is, how do we really use it to change how we learn, not necessarily just to change how we tell the teacher that we've learned something. And I think that's where we are. I think we've got people comfortable with, kids using it. We've got teachers comfortable with maybe using it for research or submitting assignments. But how do we really get to a way that it changes how we learn? So we're learning from, something in the device rather than me as a teacher just telling you. And that's a big hurdle to jump to. But we've gotten 2 technology implementation coaches that have done some good things with that. And what we're seeing is, after having them really only a semester last year, we're seeing more people be open to what they can do for them. And so to answer your question, we're still using technology almost like a substitute, but we're growing in that. And I think at the end of this year, I would have a different answer to that question.
What do you think are some of the greatest difficulties of your position as a curriculum specialist?
you want to be mindful of everybody's input. You want to be mindful of everybody's needs. But at the same time, from the district level, you know, our biggest goal is to ensure that every kid gets the same quality of education. So at some point, that means that we can't all be doing something different. And you don't ever want people to think that you don't value their situation or value their perspective on their situation. But at the end of the day, we have to have continuity if we're going to support it. And sometimes that support is funding. You know, we can't just say, well, we're going to give you this much money, you go spend it how you want, or this much money, you go spend it how you want, because that doesn't work. I mean, we've got to take our funding and our resources and move them towards one thing, because it allows us to get, I guess you'd say, more bang for your buck. It allows us to have additional tools. It allows us to have additional PD that they need. But beyond that, not just the main part of it, but just to support it. It's hard for us at a district level. Well, they're using this to learn everything I need to know about this to be helpful, and well, they're using this to learn everything I need to know, when if research shows that it works, and we again have spent a lot of time, and I hope that's what, we haven't had a big textbook adoption since I've been here, but I hope as we move toward that we don't use it as a, hey, let's just go get a textbook. We use it as a lengthy process that says, what do we need it to be? Now let's go look for what we need it to be, which one comes close. Because if you look at it as a process and people really have invested their time, they're more likely to have that buy-in. And I guess to sum up what I'm saying, it's that buy-in piece. You know, how do you get people on board with something? And, you know, because I always want to be aware of everybody's needs and wants, but at the end of the day, we got to have consensus on a lot of things.
You talked about all students having the same opportunity and things within our district. What do you think are the greatest factors that interfere with achieving goals or objectives?
Well, a lot of people would say resources, you know, we don't have enough money to buy this and that. I think resources wise, we're okay. I think one of the sometimes we get in our way with the structure of how we use certain things. Like, we'll use that example because that's pretty specific, but you know, we've got the things, how are we choosing to use them? So let me talk about IXL. I'll just use that one because everybody has that. IXL is kind of been a math tool, right? Mm-hmm. Well, we should be using it to support either, you know, core instruction, or if we're choosing to use it as an intervention, how are we using it as an intervention? Because just putting kids on it and letting them work, that structure isn't working. We're not seeing a lot of effectiveness from that. But if I put that within a structured intervention time where, okay, you may be working on something you need in IXL, well, I'm meeting with you to talk about your work in IXL, and then after a few minutes we're going to swap. So we don't ever take away that teacher piece alongside of that tool. I think that would be what would make it effective. I just think we're spending a lot of time and money on things, but when it comes to the actual implementation of them, our structures aren't in place to make that work. Some of it has to do with time. I mean, you think about a new reading program. Well, if the reading program says we need, 100 minutes to make it work, are we still using 90 minutes, or have we carved out 10 extra minutes? I mean, some of those structures that we have in place, that sometimes are at the school level, but sometimes are at the district level too, of what we're saying to do. So time is, to me, more important of a resource than the money aspect of it. With that said, I would love to have, the support people. Like, I would love to have a math coach at every elementary school. I would love to have all of those things. It's just having those people that can kind of lead that charge on the ground. Sometimes we don't always have the time for somebody to do it. I wish we had more of that. But for the most part, I think our teachers want to do, so I don't think that that's an obstacle. I have, known schools where the obstacle was the people who were tasked with doing whatever. I don't think we have that problem.
That's all the questions that we have for you, unless you have any final thoughts or anything you would like to share with us.
No, I mean, I think when you look at curriculum, it is so massive of a task with, all the varying grade levels and schools and content and all of that. I just think the biggest thing is that we have to be inclusive in how we make curriculum decisions, and even that is an obstacle in and of itself. How do you get enough people involved that everybody feels like they're on board? Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.